On a Monday, so good to have you with us live on FS1 with America's crew chief Larry McReynolds and Michael Waltrip. I'm Adam Alexander, and 24 hours ago right now, Denny Hamlin was celebrating in the Poconos, thinking he had won for a third time this year. Kyle Busch was second. It was a 1-2 finish for Joe Gibbs Racing. Then they found out their cars failed post-race inspection. They were disqualified. The first time this has happened at the Cup Series level since 1960. Oh, we've got plenty to talk about tonight, Larry.
This is 2022, and things continue to happen. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the broadcast. I watched all the post-race interviews. I turned the TV on to something else. I fired up a cigar, poured me a glass of wine. All of a sudden, my phone is blowing up. Social media is blowing up. It's like, what in the world is going on up there in Pocono? But I'm not going to let that take away from not one, not two, but three great races we saw across the board all weekend long up there.
I just love the vibe in Pocono. I mean, there was so much going on, so much excitement, and the race was thrilling. Great battles, slipping and sliding. Of course, we'll dig into Denny and Ross later, their drama that they had. But I'm telling you, Adam, I can't imagine winning a cup race. I've won a few cup races, and them coming to me and say, give me that trophy back. You can't have that anymore. That disqualification had to be heartbreaking for Denny and that whole team. His daughter on pit road, Taylor, with the celebration after the race, that was precious. And Denny's going to keep that checker flag, I bet.
Yeah, no doubt. Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, 1-2. They're disqualified. The third place finisher ends up getting that checkered flag. It's Chase Elliott. We'll hear from him later on. First, let's get to the media center. Last night, Brad Moran from NASCAR making this announcement.
There was some issues discovered that affect aero of the vehicle. The part was the front fascia. There really was no reason why there was some material that was somewhere that it shouldn't have been, and that does basically come down to a DQ. It is a penalty. Both first 11, Denny Hamlin, and the 18 of Kyle Busch been DQ'd. The teams and the owners and everybody was well aware that this new car was going to be kept with some pretty tight tolerances, and there's some areas that all of the teams are well aware that we cannot be going down the path that we had in the past with the other cars. So it is partly due with the new car, and the rules have tightened up, and everyone has to kind of abide by our new rules, which everybody's well aware of.
Joe Gibbs Racing had until noon today to issue an appeal. They did not, so there will not be an appeal. But this statement did come out earlier today from Joe Gibbs Racing, Director of Competition, Wally Brown. He said this: in our review of the post-race infractions on the 11 and 18 cars at Pocono, it was discovered that a single piece of clear tape was positioned over each of the lower corners of the front fascia ahead of the left front and right front wheel openings on both those cars. The added pieces were 2 inches wide and 5.5 inches long, with a thickness of 12 thousandths of an inch, and installed under the wrap. This change in our build process was not properly vetted within our organization, and we recognize it is against NASCAR's rules. We apologize to everyone for this mistake, and we have made changes to our process to ensure that it does not happen again. So there's a whole lot to discuss about this and break down so we all better understand. We're going to have you do that in a second, Larry. First, earlier today, Senior Vice President of Competition at NASCAR, Scott Miller, was on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio.
It was on the lower fascia. It was extra layers of vinyl that, in effect, deviated the part from the approved CAD files, and that's what it was. We can't inspect the entire field at that level of scrutiny, or we'd be there till about Wednesday or Thursday. So our procedures is to take the first and second place car and a random car, sometimes a random, sometimes not, and do that post-race tear down on them. The top 5 cars all go through an inspection process.
It's days like this, we are really thankful to have America's crew chief in studio. Larry, where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I've been asked starting last night and continue to be asked today, how was this not found until after that race? Why was it not found after qualifying, before the cars hit the track? And Scott Miller talked about the extensive post-race inspection. Part of that is critical parts of that car. They actually pull the wrap off to be able to look at the surface of the body. These cars are not painted anymore. These teams change paint schemes so often, they just wrap them. So NASCAR pulls the wrap back and looks at different parts of the car. Now, yeah, these seem like very, very small pieces. They were placed on the nose of the car. To Scott Miller, the front fascia, kind of the lower part. We're going to look at our Toyota Camry. It would be kind of on the lower left and right side there where you somewhat see the purple and the orange. And yeah, it was subtle, but when you think about a track like Pocono, where you're running the speeds that you're running there, long straightaways, long sweeping corners, a little bit ends up being a whole lot, because that's all you're looking for is just crumbs, just trying to find little gains.
Michael, I said off the top, 1960, the last time a Cup winner was disqualified because they failed inspection. This is a huge penalty. What message does this send to the competition as we look at how rare this is? It's happened at the truck and Xfinity level, but not in Cup since all the way back in 1960. This is big with 5 races to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, but I believe I saw it coming, Adam. You know, when they started disqualifying cars, you knew it was a matter of time before someone stepped out of the box and got their win taken away. That's what happened yesterday. Larry talked about the small box these teams are in. These cars are out there. Kyle Busch said in his post-race interview, we're looking for a half a tenth. That's all we want on a 2.5-mile track. So any kind of advantage that a team can gain, and obviously Joe Gibbs Racing stepped over the line with this issue, any kind of advantage you can gain, you're going to want it. So I think it sends a message to the competition. You better not be messing around with the car. We thought you already knew that. Now we're proving that taking the win away from a winner, a win away from the guy that took the checkered flag, that's a big deal.
Well, and they tried to send that message, we thought, back in the spring when Brad Keselowski in RFK was hammered. Their penalty, though, a little bit different than what we saw yesterday. How do you compare these two?
Yeah, and it's a fair question because it's been a question on my mind all morning long, but I have learned a little bit more about that because, yeah, the 6-car RFK race in Atlanta, it had to do with the rear fascia being modified or altered. And you heard Brad Moran and Scott Miller talk about one of the intents with this car is to make sure any of these single source parts, which would include the body, that you bolt them on that car and you do not mess with them. But NASCAR has the discretion to determine, you know, modified, altered, or changed. And one example I gave to somebody earlier today, if I've got a table and I saw a corner off of that table, I've modified or altered that table. But if I just take that table and I lay a tablecloth, I really hadn't modified or altered it, but I definitely have changed the look of it. I think, yeah, the timing of the 6, the timing of the 1811, different, but definitely I could see the difference after kind of getting a better understanding.
I think it's interesting the way the penalties went down. Wednesday for RFK, when they got back to the Research and Development Center, discovered those issues. But in the post-race inspection at Pocono, they found those right away. And how that differs and why NASCAR decided to make those penalties so drastically different, I'm not 100% certain, but I understand there are procedural differences in those two circumstances.
And as you heard Brad Moran say, those 2 cars are still going back to the NASCAR R&D Center, so the book is not completely closed on it yet, even though Joe Gibbs Racing has said no appeal.
You both kind of touched on your reaction to this story off the top, but let's look at this thing from a historical perspective. This doesn't happen. Are the two of you shocked we're having this conversation today that a winner had the victory taken away like what we saw with Denny Hamlin yesterday?
I was shocked when I heard the news last night. I couldn't believe that happened, but I also saw it coming at them. Like I said earlier, you know, you're going to be able to mess with the car a little bit. You're going to have that competition in your brain, like, I'm just going to put a little tape here. It's not going to hurt anything. But the box is so tight, NASCAR said, you can't mess with the car. I love the message that this has sent. That's why we've seen such great racing this year. The cars are all nearly equal, and the drivers are the big difference, and I think that's great for the sport.
I am proud they made this change back in 2019, because prior to 2019, we would have not maybe found this out until Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning. We now know before we go to bed on Sunday night truly what the official finishing order is, and I like what they're doing here. It's not good for the sport. It wasn't good for Joe Gibbs Racing, for NASCAR, for the fans, for anybody, but it's part of where we're at right now with the sport.
By the way, the last time this happened, Bill Elliott, the Hall of Famer, he was 4 years old.